Welcome to The Explainer. I'm honestly so excited to dive into this one with you today. We spend a huge chunk of our time looking up at the climate, the weather, the whole macroscopic world around us. But today, we're looking straight down. We are going to demystify this massive, entirely unseen biological engine that's literally running right beneath our feet. So let's get right into it. Just take a second to process this staggering number. In a single gram of dry soil, so just a tiny pinch of dirt you could hold right between two fingers, there are billions of bacterial cells. Billions. And interwoven right through them, literally kilometers of fungal threads. It's wild to think about. This isn't just some random collection of bugs down there. We are talking about an incredibly dense, highly active, and continuous invisible ecosystem. Which brings us to a pretty massive question. With all of that life crammed into the dirt, who is actually running the underground engine of our planet? Well, it turns out the soil microbiome is largely defined by this continuous, invisible turf war between the two dominant decomposers, bacteria and fungi. They are constantly fighting for resources, but they go about it in completely, wildly different ways. Section 1, the fast versus the slow. Meet the microbial competitors. Let's look at who's actually in the ring. It's fascinating to see how beautifully their survival strategies contrast. On one side, we've got bacteria. Think of these guys as the sprinters. They're unicellular, they reproduce in a matter of hours or days, and they absolutely thrive on simple sugars and root exudates. They have a very low carbon-to-nitrogen ratio, which basically means they drive this rapid, short-term nutrient cycling. This is what we call the fast energy channel of the soil. Now, on the other side, we have fungi. These are the marathoners. They're multicellular organisms growing in these vast, extensive hyphal networks. They operate with a much higher carbon-to-nitrogen ratio, and they have these complex extracellular enzymes. So what does that mean? It means they can break down incredibly tough, stubborn stuff, like the lignin and cellulose you find in wood or tough plant stalks. They represent the slow energy channel. And this quote from the research really hits the nail on the head. Bacteria and fungi represent fundamentally different strategies for exploiting the soil environment. The crucial takeaway here is that we aren't just talking about different microbes casually sharing an apartment. These are entirely different biological pathways that completely determine exactly how energy and nutrients flow through the Earth's ecosystems. Because these two pathways dictate so much of how our world actually works, scientists realized they needed a scoreboard. Section 2, the scoreboard, defining the bacteria to fungi ratio. Enter the bacteria to fungi, or B to F ratio. You might also occasionally see it flipped as the fungal to bacterial ratio, but it's the exact same idea. Put simply, this is a quantitative metric comparing the relative biomass or abundance of bacteria versus fungi in a soil community. It's honestly a brilliant little indicator. It takes the absolute mind-boggling complexity of the microbiome and condenses it down into a single, readable number that we can actually track. Now, this ratio naturally shifts depending on the environment. Take late successional, old-growth forests, for example. Those are heavily fungal-dominated. Makes sense, right? There's tons of complex, woody debris for those marathoners to slowly break down. Grasslands tend to sit somewhere in the middle, usually pretty balanced or maybe moderately bacterial. But then look at intensive croplands. They are almost universally dominated by bacteria. So the ecosystem definitely dictates the ratio, but as we're going to see, the ratio also dictates the ecosystem. Let's zoom out for a second. Why should you, sitting there right now, care about a microscopic turf war? Well, because the macro stakes are incredibly high. Section 3. The macro stakes: carbon, climate, and resilience. Let's actually walk step by step through how fungal-dominated soils act as massive global carbon vaults. Step 1, fungi consume complex carbon with incredibly high efficiency. That means they incorporate more of that carbon directly into their bodies, instead of just breathing it back out into the atmosphere as CO2. Step 2, their vast microscopic networks physically enmesh tiny soil particles. Step 3, certain fungi literally excrete this glycoprotein called glomalin. You can kind of think of it as biological soil glue, which leads to step 4. All this enmeshing and gluing creates what we call macro aggregates, basically little physical fortresses of soil that lock away and protect organic carbon from breaking down for the long term. But it's not just about locking away carbon. Fungal dominance builds incredible ecosystem resilience. We just talked about their high carbon use efficiency, but they also provide literal physical lifelines. Think about a severe drought. When soil dries up and cracks, bacteria get completely stranded because they desperately need films of water just to move around. But fungal networks, they can physically bridge those dry air gaps in the soil to access localized water and nutrients, effectively keeping the entire soil ecosystem alive. Plus, their slower nutrient cycling stops excess nitrogen from just washing away into our rivers. And when they eventually die, they form this highly stable necromass, which is actually a major building block for long-lasting topsoil.
But here's the kicker. We aren't just passive observers in this. Every single time we grow food, we are actively farming that microbiome. Section 4, Farming the Microbiome, How Human Management Rigs the Underground Game.
It turns out our everyday agricultural actions directly map to microbial outcomes. Take mechanical tillage, plowing the soil. That physically severs and destroys those long, delicate fungal networks, while leaving the tiny, single-celled bacteria totally fine. So boom, that shifts the game heavily toward bacteria. Adding synthetic nitrogen, that drastically lowers the carbon-to-nitrogen ratio, pumping in a fast nutrient pulse that, once again, bacteria can rapidly exploit. On the flip side, regenerative practices like no-till farming leave those fungal networks intact, and adding cover crops or organic amendments throws in the complex, tough carbon residues that only fungus have the right biological tools to actually digest. So the really crucial point to take away here is that we're essentially choosing between two totally different agricultural operating systems. A bacterial-dominated system gives you rapid nutrient cycling, it's fast-paced, it can support really quick crop yields, sure, but it requires high disturbance and it's leaky, meaning nutrients easily wash away and carbon is lost to the atmosphere. A fungal-dominated system, though, which relies on less disturbance and keeping roots in the ground, runs on slower nutrient cycling. It's highly retentive, it builds long-term soil structure, and it even naturally suppresses certain plant diseases through pure biological competition. But hold on, before we go declaring one side the ultimate winner here, we need a quick reality check. Science is rarely as simple as this guy good, that guy bad. Section 5, Beyond a Simple Score, Why Context is Everything. We have to be really careful when interpreting these ratio numbers. First off, measurement methods vary wildly in the real world. A PLFA test measures living biomass based on cell membrane lipids, while DNA sequencing looks at genetic markers. You are not going to get the exact same number from both. Secondly, soil pH is a massive driver here. Bacteria love neutral soils, fungi can tolerate a lot more acidity. So if a farmer just puts lime on an acidic field, you'll see a massive spike in bacteria purely because the pH shifted. And hey, the weather matters too. A sudden spike in the fungal ratio might just mean a nasty drought temporarily shut down the bacteria, not that your soil miraculously got healthier overnight. The researchers explicitly call this out, saying, a universal target, such as higher F2B is always better, is not scientifically defensible. Its value depends on the ecosystem and function. It really comes down to what you're trying to do. If you're growing a fast annual vegetable crop like lettuce that needs a rapid pulse of nutrients right now, a bacterial-leaning soil might actually be exactly what you want. But if you're managing a perennial orchard or your goal is to sequester carbon for the long haul, then you absolutely want to cultivate those slow, stable fungal networks. The dirt beneath our feet is basically a dynamic, living scoreboard of how we interact with the earth. Every single decision we make, from how we plow to what we plant, tips the scales in this billion-year-old microscopic competition. So I want to leave you with this to chew on. What kind of invisible underground world is being supported by the food you eat and the land you manage? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the explainer, and keep asking those big questions.